Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And before I start, as I did yesterday, I wanted to circle back around to the ongoing Israeli-Gaza war, the Israeli-Hamas war. And I want to very quickly just talk about that attack that took place on the hospital compound that allegedly killed as many as 500 persons. Now, first, we don't know how many people were killed in that strike. Two, we don't know how many weapon systems, bombs, rockets were used in that strike. We have very little information at this point. It is still being investigated. Look, both sides, Hamas, the Israelis, the United States, have a vested interest in not being the one that possibly killed civilians. So are we going to get the truth from either side? Probably not. And again, at the end of the day, what I talked about yesterday was based on prior happenings, prior ongoings within this conflict. And what I mean by that is Hamas has fired thousands upon thousands of rockets at Israel. Hezbollah has fired thousands upon thousands of rockets at Israel, including larger systems as well. None of those strikes have caused the kind of damage that is alleged in this hospital strike. So any reasonable person would then conclude that, well, maybe this was not a Hamas strike. Is it still possible that it was Hamas? It is. But again, just based on reasonable assumptions on the weapon systems that were used, the smaller Hamas rockets versus the larger ordnance, the larger munitions that the Israelis use, it seems more probable that this was an Israeli strike. Again, not being privy to any of the investigative material on either side, which none of us are, but we're going to find out. Eventually, the truth will possibly reveal itself. Hasn't yet. So we'll continue to watch what's happening within the confines of that conflict and specifically the strike, and we'll eventually know more. Now, there is a lot of buzz going on within the Ukrainian circles about an amphibious operation that is taking place in Kherson, and just how effective this operation will be. What kind of amphibious operation are we watching? Well, first, this is not a bridgehead. This is not an operation in which the Ukrainians have established pontoon bridges across the Dnipro River. That has not happened. What we are seeing are small craft crossing the Dnipro River and landing Ukrainian forces. Smaller groups of Ukrainian forces. There are not large amounts of Russian forces that set on the Dnipro River. The reason for that is Ukrainian surveillance, NATO surveillance, U.S. surveillance is able to call for immediate strikes with Ukrainian and HIMARS weapon systems against Russian forces in these areas. So the Russians have backed off about a kilometer from the main Dnipro River. Now, there is still large amounts of terrain between the main body of water and where Russian forces are. This whole area, and if we measure it real quick, is swampland with fairly large bodies of water leading all the way up to the main body of water. Now, the newest operation by the Ukrainians are happening in this area here. I'm not even going to try to butcher that word. So I will alleviate you the possible pain of hearing me try to say it. I'm not going to do it. But this locale here, where my cursor is circling, is where Ukrainian forces have landed and pushed forward a bit. Again, if we look at what has happened in this area here. So we believe there is probably a multiple company-sized elements of Ukrainian naval infantry or Marines, special forces, that are operating in this area. This is not a amphibious operation in the general sense. When you think about amphibious operation, you think about the landing of tanks, armored vehicles, supply depots, and the capability of expanding this bridgehead. That is not what we are seeing in this Ukrainian operation. The Ukrainian narrative would like you to believe that the Ukrainians have that capability and are launching another offensive in this area. Yes, they have landed troops. No, they do not have the capability of expanding this bridgehead at this point deeper into the Kherson region. The Russians are dug in about 1 to 2 kilometers behind the main body of the Dnipro River. They are able to utilize TOS-1s and TOS-2s, thermal barrack munitions, to attack Ukrainian forces. The Russians have the ability to deploy tanks and armored infantry fighting vehicles, mechanized, motorized units against these lighter Ukrainian forces. Now, these lighter Ukrainian forces are going to stick to areas very close to the main body of the Dnipro River because they can get direct fire support from the other side of the river. Once they start expanding operations deeper, they're going to run up against much more serious resistance. So we think at this point, this is all you're going to see, much like in the area over here near just to the west of Oleshki. Again, a couple dozen Ukrainian fighters rotate in and out, are deployed in this area. There have been battles in between as Russian tanks and motorized fighting vehicles do probing attacks. The Ukrainians are then able to conduct calls for fire missions against those targets. They also have anti-tank guided weapon systems in these areas as well. But neither side has the ability to really conduct offensive operations to dislodge the other at this point. At this point, the Russians just see them as a nuisance sitting there on the river's edge. The Ukrainians, again, can't really push forward because they just don't have the mechanization and the supply depots established on the other side of the Dnipro River. So get it out of your head that there's some sort of large-scale Ukrainian amphibious operation taking place in this area. It's not happening. Company-sized elements of Ukrainian forces conducting probing missions on the other side of the Dnipro River. And that's kind of where we're sitting right now. I just wanted to cover that real quick. Obviously, not a lot to report south of Orkiv. This offensive by the Ukrainians had floundered and stopped. That's why we're probably seeing this narrative-shaping operation near Kherson, further to the west. That's probably why that's going on. And operations, high-tempo operations, continue running from Avdiivka all the way north towards Kupiansk. And we're watching this again very, very closely. This area running from Donetsk all the way north towards Kupiansk is where, by and large parts, some of the most intense fighting within the conflict is taking place. Currently, we continue to see large amounts of Russian fixed-wing strikes against Ukrainian forces, large amounts of rear-area strikes by Russian forces against Ukrainian targets, well behind the lines of contact. And that's kind of where we set for it today. So thanks for joining us. We will have more very, very soon. And as always, thanks for joining us and have a good day.